The sound of my mother's hand striking my face echoed through my suburban driveway like a gunshot. For a moment, the whole neighborhood seemed to freeze. Mrs. Patterson dropped her watering can. The Jenkins family stopped loading their minivan. Even the birds went silent. My mother, Janet, stood there breathing heavily, her designer purse clutched in her manicured hands, her face twisted with rage I had not seen in 8 years. "You ungrateful piece of garbage," she hissed loud enough for every neighbor within 3 houses to hear clearly. I should probably start from the beginning, back when I was 16 and my whole world crumbled in the span of 2 months. My name is Roland, and until that spring of my junior year in high school, I thought I understood what family meant. My mother, Janet, had raised me alone since my father died when I was 7. We were a team, or at least I believed we were. Everything changed when she met Steve Morrison at a charity fundraiser downtown. Steve was a successful contractor who owned Morrison Construction, drove a black BMW, and lived in one of those massive colonial houses on Maple Ridge Drive. He was also recently divorced with 2 children, Madison, who was 12, and had the personality of a spoiled princess, and Blake, who was 10, and seemed to think the world owed him everything. My mother became completely infatuated with Steve within weeks. She started dressing differently, wearing expensive makeup, and talking about improving herself and building a better future. What she really meant was leaving our modest life behind for something more glamorous. The romance moved at lightning speed. 6 months after they met, Steve proposed during a weekend trip to Chicago. My mother said yes without even discussing it with me first. She just came home with a diamond ring the size of a marble and announced we were moving in with the Morrison family. Our first dinner together as a blended family should have been a warning sign. Steve had prepared steaks on his enormous outdoor grill, while Madison and Blake complained about everything from the temperature of their rooms to the brand of soda in the refrigerator. When I mentioned that I was struggling to balance my part-time job at the local grocery store with my homework load, Steve looked at me like I had just confessed to stealing cars. "Maybe Roland needs to learn about priorities," Steve said, cutting into his perfectly cooked steak. "Successful people make time for what matters. They do not make excuses." My mother nodded enthusiastically. "Steve is right, honey. You have been letting your responsibilities slide lately." I stared at her in disbelief. I had been working 15 hours a week to help pay for my car insurance and school supplies, something she had always praised me for before. Now, suddenly, it was irresponsible. "But Mom, you know I have been saving money for college applications and—" "Steve thinks Madison and Blake should have priority for college planning right now," she interrupted. "They have been in private school their whole lives. They have different expectations." That was the moment I realized my mother had already chosen her new family over me. Everything that happened after that was just the slow-motion collapse of our relationship. Within 3 months of the wedding, my mother had transformed into someone I barely recognized. She canceled our traditional Saturday morning pancake breakfasts to take Madison shopping for designer clothes. She stopped coming to my baseball games because Blake had violin recitals. She even moved my belongings from the main house into a converted garage space to give Madison and Blake bigger bedrooms. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in November. I had just gotten home from a particularly brutal shift at the grocery store when my mother called me into the living room. Steve was sitting in his leather recliner with a serious expression while Madison and Blake were supposedly doing homework at the dining room table, but obviously listening to every word. "Roland, we need to discuss your future." My mother began, her voice taking on the same tone she used when talking to difficult customers at her office job. "Steve and I have been talking, and we think it might be time for you to become more independent." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Steve leaned forward in his chair. "Son, you are 17 years old. Most young men your age are already thinking about moving out, getting real jobs, learning what the world is actually like. Your mother has been enabling you by letting you stay here while contributing nothing to the household. Contributing nothing. I could not keep the shock out of my voice. I pay for my own car, my own gas, my own school supplies. I work 15 hours a week and still maintain a 3.7 GPA. That is the problem right there, Steve continued. You are focused on the wrong things. Madison and Blake need tutoring support for their advanced placement classes. The family needs someone reliable to handle transportation and household responsibilities. But instead of stepping up, you are worried about some part-time grocery store job. My mother reached over and touched my arm. What Steve is trying to say is that we need you to either commit fully to being part of this family, or perhaps it is time for you to find your own path. Commit fully, what does that even mean, Steve pulled out a folded piece of paper from his shirt pocket. It means following the household rules we have established. Number 1, quit the grocery store job immediately. Number 2, provide transportation for Madison and Blake to their activities every day after school. Number 3, help with their homework and school projects as needed. Number 4, contribute $200 per month for room and board. Number 5, maintain at least a 3.8 GPA while handling these responsibilities. I stared at the paper in complete disbelief. This is insane. I cannot afford $200 a month without my job, and I cannot quit my job if you expect me to pay rent. And how am I supposed to maintain my grades while basically being a full-time babysitter? Those are the rules, Steve said firmly. Your mother and I have discussed this extensively. Either you follow them or you need to find alternative living arrangements. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to intervene to defend me, to point out how unrealistic these demands were. Instead, she nodded slowly. I think Steve is right, Roland. You have been taking advantage of our generosity for too long. It is time for you to grow up. That was the moment I realized my childhood was officially over. Not because I was turning 18 soon, but because my mother had traded me away for a chance at a more comfortable life. I spent 2 weeks trying to make the arrangement work, but it was impossible. I quit my grocery store job and started babysitting Madison and Blake, but they were absolute nightmares. Madison would purposely miss her pickup times just to watch me panic. Blake would claim he needed help with homework, then spend the entire time playing video games while I did his assignments for him. Meanwhile, my own grades started slipping because I was spending 3 hours every evening catering to their demands. When I brought these problems to my mother, she dismissed them completely. Madison and Blake are adjusting to having a new sibling. You need to be more patient and understanding. The final straw came when Madison deliberately broke my laptop computer and claimed it was an accident. When I asked my mother to make her replace it, she refused. Roland, accidents happen. Besides, maybe this is a sign that you should spend less time on the computer and more time with the family. That night, I called my best friend Tyler Henderson and explained everything that had been happening. Tyler's parents, Jim and Carol Henderson, had always treated me like a second son. When Tyler asked if I could stay with them temporarily, they did not hesitate to say yes. I packed my belongings that same weekend while my mother was out shopping with her new family. I left a note explaining that I could not live under Steve's impossible rules, and that I would be staying with the Hendersons until I could figure out a more permanent arrangement. When my mother came home and found the note, she called me immediately. But instead of trying to work things out or apologizing for how unreasonable the situation had become, she was furious. "How dare you embarrass me like this?" she screamed over the phone. "Steve's family is going to think I raised an ungrateful child who abandons his family when things get difficult." "Mom, I did not abandon anyone. You gave me an impossible choice and I gave you an opportunity to step up and be responsible, and you ran away instead. Do not contact me again until you are ready to apologize and come home on our terms." She hung up on me, and that was the last conversation we had for 8 years. But the real betrayal came later when I learned what she had been telling people about our situation. Tyler's mother mentioned running into my mother at the grocery store about 2 weeks after I moved out. According to Mrs. Henderson, my mother had spun a completely different version of events. She told me that you decided to leave because you could not handle her getting remarried, Mrs. Henderson said gently. She claimed you broke her heart by choosing to cut off all contact rather than accepting her happiness. I felt sick to my stomach. Not only had my mother chosen her new family over me, but she was now rewriting history to make herself the victim. According to her version, I was the selfish teenager who could not cope with change, rather than the son who had been systematically pushed out of his own family. That was when I truly understood what kind of person my mother had become. And it was the last time I allowed myself to hope that she might change her mind and want me back. The Henderson family saved my life in ways I am still discovering today. Jim Henderson was a high school math teacher who understood the value of education, while Carol worked as a nurse at the local hospital. They had 3 children, Tyler, who was my age and had been my closest friend since elementary school, his younger sister Ashley, who was 14, and treated me like the big brother she never had, and their youngest son Marcus, who was 12, and looked up to Tyler and me like we were superheroes. Living with the Hendersons meant adjusting to a completely different family dynamic. Unlike the tense atmosphere in Steve's house where every conversation felt like a negotiation, the Henderson home was filled with laughter, genuine support, and unconditional love. They expected me to contribute to household chores and maintain good grades, but their expectations were reasonable and came from a place of caring rather than control. I immediately found a new job at Martinez Auto Shop, working 25 hours per week, doing basic maintenance, and learning about car repair from the owner, Carlos Martinez. Carlos was a 60-year-old man who had built his business from nothing and believed in giving young people opportunities to prove themselves. Within 3 months, I was handling oil changes, tire rotations, and basic engine diagnostics. More importantly, Carlos taught me valuable lessons about work ethic, integrity, and building something meaningful with your own hands. "Roland," he would say, while we worked on particularly challenging repairs, "the difference between successful people and everyone else is not talent or luck. It is persistence and honesty. You show up every day, you do good work, and you treat people fairly. Everything else takes care of itself." During my senior year, I maintained a 3.8 GPA while working at the auto shop and living with the Hendersons. I applied to 3 state universities, knowing I would have to fund my education entirely through student loans and part-time work. My mother did not attend my graduation ceremony even though Tyler's parents invited her. According to Tyler, she claimed she had other commitments that weekend. But the Hendersons were there cheering loudly when my name was called. Carol Henderson cried when I walked across the stage, and Jim Henderson shook my hand afterward like I was his own son. "We are so proud of you, Roland," he said. "You have overcome more challenges than most adults face in their entire lives." That fall, I started classes at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, majoring in business administration with a minor in computer science. I lived in the cheapest dormitory on campus and worked 15 hours per week at the campus computer lab, helping students with basic technical problems and maintaining the university's aging network equipment. It was during my freshman year that I discovered I had a natural talent for troubleshooting technology problems. While other students struggled with even simple software issues, I could quickly diagnose and fix problems that left even some professors frustrated. By the end of my first semester, I was unofficially helping half my dormitory floor with their computer problems. That gave me an idea. During winter break, I used my savings from the auto shop job, to buy basic computer repair tools and started advertising simple repair services around campus. Roland's Computer Repair, Fast, Affordable, Reliable. I charged $25 for basic software problems and $50 for hardware repairs, which was significantly less expensive than taking computers to off-campus repair shops. The business grew faster than I had anticipated. Word spread through social media and campus bulletin boards that there was a trustworthy student who could fix computer problems quickly and cheaply. By the end of my sophomore year, I was earning more money from computer repairs than from my campus job. During my junior year, I expanded the business to include custom computer builds for fellow students who wanted gaming computers but could not afford retail prices. I would research the best components for their budgets, order parts online, and assemble complete systems for significantly less than they would pay at electronics stores. This required learning advanced technical skills, but I loved the challenge of optimizing performance while staying within strict budget constraints. The real breakthrough came when Dr. Elena Martinez, who taught advanced business courses, learned about my computer repair business. Dr. Martinez was not related to Carlos from the auto shop, but she had a similar philosophy about hard work and integrity. She became my academic mentor and helped me understand the business principles that could turn my technical skills into a real career. Roland, you have something that cannot be taught in any classroom, Dr. Martinez told me during one of our regular meetings. You understand both the technical aspects of your work and the customer service aspects. You solve problems efficiently, you communicate clearly with non-technical people, and you build trust with your clients. Those skills will take you much further than any degree. Dr. Martinez helped me apply for an internship at a small technology startup in Springfield during the summer between my junior and senior years. The company Dataflow Solutions provided database management and network support for local businesses. The internship was supposed to be unpaid, but after 2 weeks, the owner, David Kim, was so impressed with my work that he offered me a part-time salary and the possibility of a full-time position after graduation. Working at Dataflow Solutions taught me about the business side of technology services. I learned how to write proposals for potential clients, how to manage multiple projects simultaneously, and how to explain complex technical concepts in language that business owners could understand. More importantly, I learned that there was enormous demand for reliable local technology support among small and medium-sized businesses. During my senior year, I continued working part-time at Dataflow Solutions while finishing my degree and maintaining my campus computer repair business. I was exhausted most of the time, but I could see my future taking shape. David Kim had already offered me a full-time position starting at $45,000 per year, which felt like an incredible salary for a recent college graduate. But the most devastating discovery of my college years had nothing to do with academics or career planning. It happened during finals week of my senior year when I was cleaning out old email accounts and organizing my digital files before graduation. I found an email thread that I had completely forgotten about from my senior year of the high school. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Roberts, had sent information about a full-ride scholarship opportunity from the Illinois Merit Foundation. The scholarship was specifically designed for students from single-parent families who had demonstrated academic excellence despite financial hardship. The email had been sent to my old family email address, the one my mother controlled when I lived at home. I had never seen it because by the time it arrived, I had already moved in with the Hendersons and was using a different email account. According to the information Mrs. Roberts had sent, I was an ideal candidate for the scholarship. My GPA, my work history, my extracurricular activities, and my family situation all met their criteria perfectly. The deadline for applications had been February 1st of my senior year, just 2 months after I moved out of my mother's house. I felt sick reading the email thread. If I had received this information when it was sent, I could have applied for the scholarship and potentially graduated from college without any student loan debt. Instead, I was finishing my degree with almost $30,000 in loans. The worst part was wondering whether my mother had seen this email and deliberately chosen not to forward it to me. 2 weeks later, Tyler's mother inadvertently confirmed my suspicions during a casual conversation about college costs. "It is so expensive these days," Mrs. Henderson said while we were discussing my upcoming graduation. "I remember running into your mother at the bank a couple of years ago, and she mentioned how relieved she was to not have to worry about college expenses anymore." My heart sank. If my mother had been relieved about not paying for college, that meant she knew I was funding my education myself. And if she had made comments about college expenses, she had almost certainly seen information about scholarships and financial aid opportunities. The realization that my mother had likely sabotaged my chance at a full scholarship cut deeper than even the original abandonment. When she kicked me out, I could tell myself that she was confused, manipulated by Steve, or just making poor decisions under pressure. But deliberately preventing me from accessing educational opportunities was something completely different. It was calculated cruelty designed to keep me struggling and dependent. That discovery taught me an important lesson about the difference between disappointment and betrayal. Disappointment is when people fail to meet your expectations. Betrayal is when people actively work against your best interests while pretending to care about you. My mother had crossed that line, and I finally understood that there was no going back. 5 years after graduation, I barely recognized the struggling college student I used to be. My life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined when I was sleeping on a dormitory room floor, surviving on ramen noodles and determination. Data Flow Solutions had been an excellent launching pad for my career, but after 2 years, I realized I had learned everything David Kim could teach me. More importantly, I had identified gaps in the local technology services market that a small agile company could fill better than larger corporations. With Dr. Martinez's guidance and a carefully planned business strategy, I left Dataflow to start my own company, Summit Tech Solutions. The transition was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I used my savings as startup capital, rented a small office space in a converted warehouse downtown, and spent 3 months developing service packages tailored specifically to small and medium-sized businesses in central Illinois. Instead of trying to compete with large national companies on price, I focused on providing personalized service and rapid response times that bigger companies could not match. My first major client was Henderson, manufacturing a family-owned company that produced agricultural equipment for local farmers. The owner, Robert Henderson, was not related to Tyler's family, but he had heard about my work through word-of-mouth recommendations. Henderson Manufacturing had been struggling with outdated computer systems and unreliable technical support from a national company that treated them like a low-priority account. Within 6 months of switching to Summit Tech Solutions, Henderson Manufacturing had upgraded their entire network infrastructure, implemented new inventory management software, and reduced their technology-related downtime by 80%. More importantly, Robert Henderson became my most enthusiastic advocate, referring me to 3 other business owners who became long-term clients. The business grew steadily over the next 3 years. I hired my first employee, Jennifer Walsh, a recent computer science graduate, who brought fresh energy and innovative ideas to our service offerings. 6 months later, I brought on Marcus Thompson, an experienced network administrator who had been laid off when a larger company moved their operations out of state. By year 4, Summit Tech Solutions employed 12 people and served 47 clients across 3 states. Our success was built on a simple philosophy that Carlos Martinez had taught me at the auto shop: show up consistently, do excellent work, and treat people with respect. We never made promises we could not keep. We responded to emergency calls within 2 hours, and we took time to educate our clients about technology instead of just fixing problems and leaving. The financial rewards were beyond anything I had imagined possible. By my 28th birthday, I was earning more money annually than my mother and Steve had made combined during their best years. I owned a beautiful 3-bedroom house in Westfield Estates, one of the most desirable neighborhoods in the city. My mortgage payment was less than 20% of my monthly income, and I had built substantial savings and investment accounts. But the real measure of my success was not financial. It was the life I had built around meaningful relationships and genuine accomplishments. I had found love with Sarah Chen, a pediatric nurse at Regional Medical Center who shared my values about hard work, integrity, and family. We met during a volunteer event at the Children's Hospital where I was donating refurbished computers to help young patients stay connected with their families and schoolwork during extended treatments. Sarah understood my complicated relationship with my biological family because she had experienced something similar with her own parents who had disapproved of her career choice and tried to pressure her into pursuing law or medicine instead of nursing. We bonded over late-night conversations about building meaningful lives despite family dysfunction, and she helped me process the lingering anger and hurt I carried from my mother's abandonment. "You know what I love most about you," Sarah told me one evening while we were cooking dinner together in my kitchen. "You never use your difficult childhood as an excuse for anything. You took something painful and turned it into motivation to build something better." Sarah was right. I had consciously chosen to use my mother's rejection as fuel for personal growth, rather than as an excuse for bitterness or self-pity. I regularly donated time and money to scholarship funds for students from broken homes, finding deep satisfaction in helping young people avoid some of the financial struggles I had endured. The Henderson family remained central to my chosen family, and I made sure to stay connected despite my busy schedule. Tyler had become a successful accountant and married his college girlfriend Amanda. Their first child, a daughter named Emma, called me Uncle Roland, and had no idea that I was not actually related to her parents. Dr. Martinez had retired from teaching but still served as my informal mentor and advisor. She had been instrumental in helping me navigate the early challenges of business ownership, and I credited much of my success to her wisdom and guidance. When I established the Martinez Scholarship Fund for first-generation college students, she cried during the announcement ceremony. "Roland, you have become the kind of man who lifts other people up," she said afterward. That is the true definition of success. I had also maintained my relationship with Carlos from the auto shop, even though I no longer needed to work on cars for income. I still stopped by occasionally to help with complex diagnostic problems, and Carlos had become like a grandfather figure in my chosen family. My professional reputation had grown to the point where I was invited to speak at business conferences and technology seminars. Local newspapers had featured articles about Summit Tech Solutions as an example of successful entrepreneurship, and the Chamber of Commerce had recognized me as Young Business Leader of the Year. But despite all these accomplishments, I had deliberately kept my success relatively private on social media. I shared updates with close friends like Tyler and the Henderson family, but I avoided posting about my business achievements or financial status. Something about my mother's abandonment had taught me to be cautious about who had access to information about my life. That caution proved to be wise when Sarah mentioned a strange encounter she had experienced at the hospital 3 months earlier. "I meant to tell you about this sooner, but it was so odd that I forgot about it until now," Sarah said during dinner one Thursday evening. "A woman approached me in the hospital cafeteria and claimed to be your mother. She knew my name and knew that we were dating." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. What did she look like? Older woman, probably mid-50s, brown hair, expensive-looking clothes. She was very polished, but seemed nervous. She asked a lot of questions about our relationship and about your work. What kind of questions? She wanted to know how long we had been together, whether we were serious, what kind of business you owned, how successful you were. I thought it was sweet that your mother was interested in your life. So I told her about Summit Tech Solutions and how proud I was of what you had built. My stomach clenched with dread. Sarah, I have not spoken to my mother in 8 years. She kicked me out when I was 17 and chose her new family over me. Sarah's face went pale. Oh no, Roland, I am so sorry. I had no idea. She seemed so genuinely interested and caring. 2 days later, Tyler called with even more disturbing information. His younger sister Ashley, now a junior in college, had been contacted by someone claiming to be researching successful local entrepreneurs for a magazine article. Ashley said this woman asked detailed questions about your background, your college years, your business, even your relationship with our family, Tyler explained. Ashley thought it was legitimate because the woman seemed to know so much about you already. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. My mother had been investigating my life for months, gathering information from people who cared about me, and had no reason to be suspicious of her motives. She knew about my business success, my relationship with Sarah, my financial stability, and my continued connection to the Henderson family. The question was not whether she would eventually approach me directly, but what she would want when she did. And given her history of manipulation and self-serving behavior, I was certain that whatever brought her back into my life would not be motivated by genuine love or remorse. I started preparing myself emotionally for a confrontation that felt as inevitable as a natural disaster. After 8 years of peace and success, my mother was coming back, and I knew she would not be coming empty-handed or with good intentions. The confrontation began on a Tuesday morning in March when my assistant Grace buzzed my office with obvious confusion in her voice. "Roland, there is a woman here who claims to be your mother. She says she needs to speak with you about a family emergency." My heart started racing, but I kept my voice steady. "Did she give you her name?" "Janet Morrison. She is with 2 younger people, a woman and a man, probably college-aged." I closed my eyes and took 3 deep breaths the way Sarah had taught me to manage anxiety. After 8 years of silence, my mother had finally made her move, and she had brought reinforcements. "Tell her I will be with her in 5 minutes. Offer them coffee or water while they wait." I used those 5 minutes to call Sarah and let her know what was happening. Then quickly reviewed my schedule to see how much time I could afford for whatever drama was about to unfold. My 2 o'clock meeting with Peterson Manufacturing was too important to reschedule, which meant this conversation would have a natural time limit. When I walked into the reception area, I barely recognized the woman who had kicked me out of her life nearly a decade earlier. Janet looked older, more polished, but also somehow smaller than I remembered. She was wearing an expensive-looking navy blue suit and carrying a designer purse that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Her hair was professionally styled, and her makeup was flawless. Beside her sat a young woman who could only be Madison, now 20 years old, and strikingly beautiful in the same calculated way as her stepmother. She was wearing a Northwestern University sweatshirt and looked uncomfortable, as if she would rather be anywhere else in the world. The young man I assumed was Blake had grown into a tall, lanky 18-year-old who seemed to be trying very hard to look mature and serious. He was wearing khakis and a button-down shirt like he was dressed for a job interview. "Roland," my mother said, standing up with tears already forming in her eyes. "You look so successful, so handsome. I have missed you so much." Her performance was flawless. If I had not known better, I would have believed she was a heartbroken mother, finally reuniting with her beloved son. But I did know better, and I could see the calculation behind her emotional display. "Janet," I replied deliberately, using her first name instead of calling her mom. "This is unexpected. What brings you to my office?" The use of her first name clearly stung, but she recovered quickly. "I know I have no right to show up here unannounced, but I did not know how else to reach you. We need to talk, Roland. As a family." Madison and Blake exchanged glances, and I got the distinct impression they had been coached on what to say and when to say it. "I am scheduled for meetings all afternoon," I said honestly, "but I can spare a few minutes if this is urgent. Could we perhaps meet somewhere more private? Maybe your home this evening? There are things I need to explain, things you deserve to know about what happened after you left." Again, notice how she phrased that. Not "after I kicked you out" or "after we had that terrible fight," but "after you left," as if my departure had been entirely my choice. "Fine, 7 o'clock tonight. Do you know where I live?" "Madison can find it," Janet said quickly, which confirmed that they had already researched my address and probably my entire neighborhood. "Just the three of you," I specified. "Steve is not welcome in my home." For the first time, Janet's composure cracked slightly. "Steve is not part of our family anymore, Roland. A lot has changed since you went away." I nodded curtly and returned to my office, but I spent the rest of the day feeling unsettled and suspicious. Something about the whole encounter felt rehearsed, like they had practiced their lines beforehand. Madison's discomfort seemed genuine, but Blake appeared to be playing a role he had been assigned. That evening, I made sure Sarah was present when they arrived. If my mother was planning some kind of manipulation or emotional ambush, I wanted a witness who could help me stay grounded and objective. Janet began the conversation by explaining that Steve had left her 6 months earlier after their marriage fell apart. According to her version of events, Steve had become controlling and financially abusive, ultimately abandoning the family when his construction business encountered difficulties. "I know I made terrible mistakes when you were younger," Janet said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "I was so desperate to provide security for all of us that I let Steve convince me his way was best. I should have protected you, Roland. I should have put my children first." Madison nodded along with this narrative, but something about her body language suggested she was not entirely comfortable with the story being told. Blake remained mostly silent, occasionally glancing at Janet as if waiting for permission to speak. Then came the real purpose of their visit. "Roland, I need to be honest with you about why we are here," Janet continued. "Madison has been accepted to Northwestern University for the fall semester. It has been her dream school since she was little, but the tuition and expenses will be almost $60,000 for the first year alone." "Congratulations, Madison," I said genuinely. "Northwestern is an excellent school." "Thank you," Madison replied quietly. "I have been working really hard for this opportunity." Janet leaned forward in her chair. "Blake is also looking at colleges for next year. He has his heart set on attending a private liberal arts school, but the costs are just overwhelming. As a single mother, I simply cannot afford to give them the education they deserve." Here it comes, I thought. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything after the way our relationship ended," Janet continued. "But you are doing so well for yourself, Roland. Your business, this beautiful home, the success you have built. Madison and Blake are your family, your siblings. I was hoping you might consider helping with their education costs." Sarah reached over and took my hand, offering silent support. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. Janet's relief was visible. "Well, if you could help with Madison's first-year tuition, that would be about $60,000. And Blake will probably need similar assistance next year. I know it sounds like a lot, but you have done so well for yourself. This would change their entire futures." I looked at Madison and Blake carefully. "What do you two think about this plan?" Madison seemed genuinely uncomfortable. "I appreciate any help you might be able to provide, Roland, but I understand if this is not something you want to do." We have not exactly been close. Blake nodded enthusiastically. I think it would be amazing if you could help us, Roland. We are family, right? And families help each other. That phrase, families help each other, sounded exactly like something he had been taught to say. I took a deep breath and looked directly at Janet. You abandoned me when I was 17 years old because I could not follow Steve's impossible rules. You chose your new family over your own son. You did not attend my graduation, you never called to check on my well-being, and you have had no contact with me for 8 years. Roland, I am not finished. Now you show up at my office having clearly researched my life and business asking for $60,000 as if the past 8 years never happened. You are not asking for help rebuilding our relationship. You are asking for money. Janet's tears seemed less genuine now. I understand you are angry, and you have every right to be. But this is not about our past mistakes. This is about giving Madison and Blake opportunities they deserve. What they deserve is parents who actually provide for them, instead of expecting a brother they barely know to fund their educations. The room went silent. Sarah squeezed my hand tighter. I am not going to give you $60,000, Janet. Madison, if you want to build a relationship with me as siblings, I would be open to that. But it would be a relationship, not a financial transaction. Blake, the same goes for you. Janet's mask finally slipped completely. So, you are just going to let your family struggle while you live in luxury. You are going to punish innocent children because you are angry at me. I am not punishing anyone. I am declining to fund college educations for people who are essentially strangers to me. Madison and Blake have options, student loans, scholarships, community college, state schools. The same options I had when I was their age. That is different, and you know it. You were always resourceful and independent. Madison and Blake have been raised with different expectations. And there it was, the real difference between us. I had been raised to work for what I wanted. Madison and Blake had been raised to expect other people to provide for them. This conversation is over, I said, standing up. You are welcome to stay in touch if you genuinely want to rebuild our relationship. But I will not be anyone's ATM. As they were leaving, I noticed Janet discreetly photographing the expensive electronics and furniture in my living room while pretending to look for her keys. The calculated nature of her behavior was becoming more obvious by the minute. After they left Sarah and I sat in the kitchen processing what had just happened. That was not a family reunion, Sarah said quietly. That was a business proposal. She was absolutely right. My mother had not come back because she missed me or because she regretted her past decisions. She had come back because she needed money and viewed me as a potential source of funding. Everything about the visit, from the timing to the rehearsed emotional appeals to the specific dollar amounts, had been carefully planned. But what I did not realize at the time was that this was only the beginning. My mother's financial desperation was far worse than she had revealed, and my refusal to cooperate with her plans was about to trigger a campaign of harassment and manipulation that would threaten everything I had worked to build. My refusal to fund Madison and Blake's college educations did not end Janet's campaign. Instead, it marked the beginning of an escalating series of harassment tactics that revealed the true depth of her desperation and vindictiveness. The phone call started 3 days after our meeting. Janet would call my office at random times throughout the day, sometimes crying about how disappointed Madison and Blake were, sometimes angry about my selfishness, sometimes attempting to negotiate smaller amounts of money. Grace, my assistant, became expert at deflecting these calls, but they were disruptive and embarrassing. Then, Janet began showing up at my home at unexpected times. I would come home from work to find her sitting in my driveway, waiting to continue arguments about family obligations and moral responsibility. Sometimes she brought Madison, who looked increasingly uncomfortable with her stepmother's aggressive tactics. Blake seemed to enjoy the drama and would glare at me accusingly whenever I refused to change my mind. The situation escalated when Janet started approaching my neighbors with carefully crafted sob stories about her ungrateful son who had abandoned his struggling family. Mrs. Patterson, who lived next door, awkwardly mentioned that a woman claiming to be my mother had spent 20 minutes explaining how I had turned my back on family and was too proud to help my own siblings. She seemed very upset, Mrs. Patterson said gently. I hope you two can work things out. I realized Janet was systematically trying to damage my reputation in my own neighborhood, painting herself as a victim, and me as a heartless son who had forgotten where I came from. But the most alarming escalation came when Janet began targeting my professional life. She started appearing at my office during busy periods, demanding to speak with me, and causing scenes in the reception area when I was unavailable. Grace reported that potential clients had mentioned hearing concerning things about my character and family situation. The breaking point came when David Peterson, my largest client, pulled me aside during what should have been a routine project update meeting. Roland, I need to ask you about something awkward, David said uncomfortably. A woman contacted our office claiming to be your mother. She made some serious allegations about your business practices and personal character. My stomach dropped. What kind of allegations? She claimed you had stolen money from your family and built your business using funds that did not belong to you. She also suggested that we should be concerned about trusting you with our sensitive data given your history of deception and family betrayal. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. Janet was not just demanding money anymore. She was actively trying to destroy my livelihood and professional reputation. David, I can explain exactly what this is about, I said, and spent the next 15 minutes giving him an honest account of my family history and Janet's current harassment campaign. I offered to provide character references from Dr. Martinez, the Henderson family, and other people who had known me for years. David listened carefully and ultimately decided to continue our business relationship, but the fact that Janet had attempted such sabotage showed me how far she was willing to go to force my compliance with her demands. The situation reached its explosive climax on a Saturday morning in April. Sarah was visiting for the weekend, and we were planning to spend a quiet day working in my garden and maybe grilling dinner outside. Instead, Janet arrived unannounced with Blake in tow, apparently determined to have another confrontation about college funding. Roland, we need to settle this once and for all, Janet announced, storming up my driveway without any greeting or acknowledgement of Sarah's presence. Janet, you cannot keep showing up at my home whenever you feel like having an argument, I replied, staying calm but firm. I can show up at my son's home whenever I want to talk to him, she shot back. And we are not leaving until you agree to help Blake with his college applications. I have already given you my answer. It has not changed. Blake stepped forward with a prepared speech about how much college meant to him and how I was the only person who could make his dreams possible. It was clear Janet had coached him extensively on what emotional buttons to push and which phrases would be most effective. When their guilt trip tactics failed to work, Janet became increasingly aggressive. She started yelling about ungrateful children and how I had no right to live in luxury while my family struggled. She accused me of being selfish, prideful, and cruel. She claimed I was punishing innocent children because of my anger toward her. You have become exactly like your father, she screamed, apparently, forgetting that my father had been a loving man who died when I was 7 years old. Selfish and cold, and incapable of caring about anyone but yourself. That insult crossed a line I had not even realized existed. My father had been the most generous, caring person I had ever known, and Janet had loved him deeply during their marriage. For her to use his memory as a weapon in her manipulative tantrum was unforgivable. "You need to leave my property immediately," I said, my voice shaking with controlled anger. "I am not going anywhere until you agree to help Blake," Janet replied defiantly. "Then, I am calling the police to have you removed for trespassing." I pulled out my phone and started dialing, but Janet lunged forward and slapped me across the face with enough force to knock my phone out of my hand. The sound of the slap echoed through the neighborhood like a gunshot. Mrs. Patterson dropped her watering can. The Jenkins family stopped loading their minivan. Even the birds seemed to go silent. "You ungrateful piece of garbage!" Janet hissed loud enough for every neighbor within 3 houses to hear clearly. Blake looked shocked by his stepmother's physical violence, as if this had gone further than even he had expected. Sarah immediately stepped between Janet and me, her nurse training kicking in as she assessed whether I had been injured. "Ma'am, you need to leave this property right now," Sarah said firmly. "If you put your hands on him again, I will call the police myself." Janet seemed to realize she had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The calculated mask she had been wearing for weeks finally fell away completely, revealing the desperate, bitter woman underneath. "This is not over, Roland," she said as she grabbed Blake's arm and started walking back toward their car. "You think you can just abandon your family and face no consequences. You think your precious reputation and your perfect life are safe. We will see about that." As their car pulled away, I stood in my driveway with my face still stinging from the slap, watching my neighbors slowly return to their Saturday morning activities. The woman who had given birth to me had just physically assaulted me in front of witnesses because I refused to give her money. But the worst part was realizing that Janet's threat about consequences was not empty bluster. She had already demonstrated her willingness to lie to my professional contacts and sabotage my business relationships. The physical assault was just the latest escalation in what had become a systematic campaign to destroy my life. That afternoon, my phone rang with a call that confirmed my worst fears about what Janet was planning next. "Roland, this is Dr. Martinez. I need to warn you about something very concerning that happened yesterday." My former professor and mentor explained that someone claiming to be my mother had contacted the university, trying to access my academic records while spreading stories about my alleged theft of family funds and history of deception. Janet had told university staff that she was conducting an investigation into financial fraud and needed documentation to support legal action against me. Of course, we did not provide any information, Dr. Martinez assured me. "But, Roland, this woman seemed very determined and well-informed about your background. I am worried about what she might try next." As I hung up the phone, I finally understood the full scope of what I was dealing with. Janet was not just a desperate mother asking for help with college expenses. She was someone willing to commit identity theft, harassment, defamation, and assault to get what she wanted. And if I did not take decisive action to protect myself, she was going to continue escalating until she either got the money she demanded or destroyed everything I had worked to build. The time for trying to handle this situation quietly and diplomatically was over. Janet had declared war on my life, and I was going to have to fight back with every legal weapon at my disposal. Instead of letting anger and hurt drive my response, I channeled the same strategic thinking that had built Summit Tech Solutions into a successful business. Janet had made a critical mistake by underestimating both my resources and my determination to protect what I had built. My first call was to Amanda Richardson, the attorney who had helped me incorporate my business and handle various legal matters over the years. Amanda was a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who specialized in both business law and personal protection issues. "Amanda, I need your help with a serious harassment and defamation situation," I explained during our emergency meeting on Monday morning. "My biological mother has been conducting a campaign to damage my business and personal reputation, and yesterday she physically assaulted me in my own driveway." I provided Amanda with detailed documentation of every incident, phone call logs, witness statements from neighbors, email communications from Janet, and a copy of the security footage that had captured the assault. I also gave her the names of business contacts Janet had approached with false allegations. "Roland, this is far more serious than typical family drama," Amanda said after reviewing the evidence. "What you are describing constitutes criminal harassment, defamation, and assault. We need to pursue this through both civil and criminal channels." While Amanda began preparing legal documents, I implemented my own counter-strategy focused on protecting my business and personal reputation. I started by proactively contacting every major client to provide them with a professional, factual explanation of the harassment situation. Rather than hiding from Janet's allegations, I addressed them directly with transparency and documentation. "I want you to be aware that my estranged biological mother has been contacting some of our business partners with false allegations about my character and business practices," I explained to David Peterson and other key clients. "This stems from a family financial dispute where I declined to fund college expenses for her stepchildren. I have documented evidence of harassment and am pursuing legal remedies." Most clients appreciated my honesty and professionalism in addressing the situation head-on. Several offered character references and expressed concern for my well-being. David Peterson even mentioned that Janet's desperate phone calls had seemed suspicious from the beginning. Next, I implemented comprehensive security measures at both my home and office. I upgraded my home security system with additional cameras, motion sensors, and direct monitoring by a professional security company. At the office, Grace was instructed to document and record any contact from Janet or her family members. But my most important discovery came from the private investigator Amanda recommended to help gather evidence for our legal case. Within 3 days, investigator Michael Torres had uncovered information about Janet's financial situation that explained her desperation and revealed the true scope of her duplicity. "Your mother is in much worse financial trouble than she admitted," Michael explained during his report. "Steve Morrison did not just leave her. He divorced her after discovering she had been forging his signature on credit applications and stealing money from his business accounts. She faces potential criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement." The investigation revealed that Janet owed more than $120,000 in credit card debt, had defaulted on her mortgage, and was facing foreclosure proceedings. Her expensive clothes and designer accessories were purchased with stolen credit, and she was essentially homeless, staying with different friends and relatives while trying to maintain the appearance of financial stability. "There is more," Michael continued. "She has been running the same guilt and manipulation strategy on other family members. She contacted your Uncle Dave in Phoenix, spinning stories about you being wealthy and ungrateful, trying to get money for supposed legal fees to recover stolen family funds. Most shocking of all, the investigation uncovered evidence that Janet had attempted to open credit cards in my name using old address information from when I lived at home. The applications had been flagged and denied by my credit monitoring service, but the attempts constituted clear evidence of attempted identity theft. She also approached the Henderson family," Michael revealed. "She told them she was a concerned mother trying to help her troubled son with debt problems, asking for information about your financial situation, and whether they thought you might be struggling with gambling or substance abuse issues." I felt sick realizing how extensively Janet had been manipulating and lying to people who cared about me. Her campaign was not just about college money. She was systematically trying to damage every important relationship in my life while simultaneously attempting to commit identity theft. But the most valuable discovery was documentation of similar harassment campaigns Janet had conducted against her own brother and Steve's business partners after their divorce. She had a documented pattern of using guilt manipulation and false allegations to extract money from people she viewed as financially successful. Armed with this evidence, Amanda filed comprehensive legal actions on multiple fronts. We obtained an emergency restraining order that prohibited Janet from contacting me, my employees, my clients, or my neighbors. We filed criminal complaints for harassment assault and attempted identity theft. We also prepared civil lawsuits for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday, and I spent the week preparing for what I expected to be Janet's final attempt to manipulate the legal system in her favor. But the most important preparation was emotional rather than legal. I spent hours talking with Sarah Dr. Martinez and the Henderson family about the lessons this experience had taught me about setting boundaries and protecting myself from toxic people. "You know what I am most proud of," Sarah said one evening, while we were reviewing the legal documents Amanda had prepared. "You never let her make you into the kind of person she is. You stayed honest, you treated people with respect, and you protected yourself without trying to hurt her back." Dr. Martinez echoed similar sentiments when I called to update her on the situation. "Roland, you have learned the difference between justice and revenge. Justice is protecting yourself and holding people accountable for their actions. Revenge is trying to hurt people because they hurt you. What you are doing is justice." As the court date approached, I felt more confident and prepared than I had since this nightmare began. Janet had underestimated my resources, my support network, and my determination to protect what I had built. She had also overestimated her ability to manipulate and intimidate me into compliance. The time for her to face real consequences for her choices was finally approaching, and I was ready to ensure that justice was served. The restraining order hearing became the stage for Janet's final performance and her complete exposure as a manipulative fraud. Janet arrived at the courthouse with a different lawyer than expected, a young public defender, who clearly had not been fully briefed on the complexity of the case. She was dressed in her usual expensive outfit, still maintaining the facade of respectability despite her deteriorating financial situation. Her strategy was predictable: portray herself as a heartbroken mother being persecuted by an ungrateful son who had turned his back on family obligations. She claimed the college funding requests were reasonable attempts to rebuild our relationship, and that any harassment allegations were exaggerated reactions to normal family discussions. But Amanda had prepared meticulously, and the evidence we presented systematically dismantled every aspect of Janet's victim narrative. First, we presented the security footage of Janet physically assaulting me in my driveway, which clearly showed her striking me after I had asked her to leave my property. There was no ambiguity about who the aggressor had been in that encounter. Next, we documented the pattern of harassment against my business, including recorded phone calls where Janet made false allegations about my character to professional contacts. David Peterson provided a sworn statement describing Janet's attempts to damage my business relationships with fabricated claims about fraud and theft. Then came the evidence of attempted identity theft copies of credit card applications submitted in my name using forged information and old addresses. The credit monitoring service provided documentation showing how these fraudulent applications had been flagged and rejected. But the most damaging evidence was the pattern of similar behavior Janet had exhibited toward other family members. Michael Torres presented documentation showing how Janet had approached my Uncle Dave, the Henderson family, and even Steve Morrison's business associates with comparable manipulation schemes. The turning point in the hearing came when Madison unexpectedly asked to address the court. "Your Honor, I need to tell the truth about what has been happening," Madison said, her voice shaking but determined. "Janet is not my biological mother. She is my stepmother, and she has been forcing me to participate in this scheme to get money from Roland." The courtroom went silent as Madison explained that she had never actually been accepted to Northwestern University. Janet had fabricated the acceptance letter to create urgency and justify the specific dollar amount she was demanding. "I never wanted to be part of this." Madison continued. I tried to tell Janet that Roland did not owe us anything, but she said we were family now and had to stick together. She promised me that if I helped her get money from Roland, she would actually help me apply to colleges properly. Blake reluctantly confirmed Madison's testimony, admitting that he had been coached on what to say during our family meetings, and that his interest in expensive private colleges had been exaggerated to support Janet's financial demands. Janet told us that Roland was rich and selfish, and that it was only fair for him to share his success with family, Blake explained. But after seeing how she treated him, I realized she was using us to try to steal from him. Janet's lawyer attempted damage control by arguing that his client was simply a desperate single mother who had made poor decisions under financial pressure. But the judge was clearly unimpressed with Janet's pattern of deception and manipulation. Mrs. Morrison, the evidence presented today shows a systematic campaign of harassment, defamation, and attempted fraud, Judge Patricia Williams said sternly. This goes far beyond normal family disagreements or even poor judgment under stress. Your actions constitute serious criminal behavior. The judge granted our restraining order with comprehensive terms. Janet was prohibited from contacting me, my employees, my family, my friends, or my business associates. She was banned from my neighborhood and workplace. Any violation would result in immediate arrest and prosecution. More importantly, Judge Williams referred Janet's case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution on charges of harassment, assault, attempted identity theft, and fraud. But the most significant outcome of the hearing was not legal, it was personal. After the proceedings ended, Madison and Blake approached me in the courthouse hallway. "Roland, I owe you a huge apology," Madison said, tears streaming down her face. I knew what Janet was doing was wrong, but I was scared and confused. She made it seem like you had abandoned us and owed us something. Madison, you were being manipulated by an adult who should have protected you instead of using you, I replied. I do not blame you for any of this. Blake was less articulate, but equally sincere. I want to get to know you as my brother, not as someone who might give me money. Would that be okay? Over the following months, I did develop genuine relationships with Madison and Blake, separate from any involvement with Janet. Madison enrolled in community college and discovered she actually preferred smaller, more supportive educational environments. Blake found his passion in automotive technology and enrolled in a trade school program that led to excellent career opportunities. Both of them thrived once they were free from Janet's manipulation and unrealistic expectations. They learned to set their own goals and work toward them independently rather than expecting other people to fund their dreams. Janet faced criminal prosecution and was ultimately convicted on multiple charges. She served 6 months in jail and was ordered to pay restitution for the financial damage she had caused to various family members. The conviction also resulted in permanent restrictions on her ability to access credit or open financial accounts without supervision. The experience taught me profound lessons about the difference between family and relatives. Family consists of people who love you unconditionally, support your growth, and celebrate your success. Relatives are just people who happen to share genetic material or legal connections. My real family included Sarah, who stood by me throughout the crisis and helped me process the emotional challenges without losing my values or integrity. It included the Henderson family, who had given me shelter and love when my biological family failed me. It included Dr. Martinez, who had mentored me through professional and personal development. It included Tyler, who had been my closest friend since childhood and never wavered in his loyalty. 6 months after the court hearing, Sarah and I got engaged in the garden behind my house, surrounded by this chosen family who had supported us through both good times and difficult challenges. The engagement party included the Hendersons, Dr. Martinez Carlos, from the auto shop, my employees from Summit Tech Solutions, and Madison and Blake, who had become genuine siblings, rather than reluctant participants in someone else's manipulation scheme. The most meaningful moment of the celebration came when Dr. Martinez offered a toast that captured everything I had learned from this experience. Roland has shown us that success is not just about building wealth or achieving professional recognition, she said, raising her glass. Real success is about building a life surrounded by people who love you for who you are, who support your dreams and who celebrate your achievements without expecting anything in return. It is about having the courage to protect what you have built and the wisdom to forgive people who hurt you without allowing them to hurt you again. Today, Summit Tech Solutions continues to grow and provide excellent service to our clients. I have established the Martinez-Henderson Scholarship Fund, which provides educational support for students from broken families who demonstrate academic excellence and personal resilience. Sarah and I have been happily married for 2 years and are expecting our first child next spring. Janet has had no contact with any of us since her conviction. According to Madison, she moved to another state and is working in retail while rebuilding her life under court supervision. I genuinely hope she finds peace and learns healthier ways to build relationships, but I also maintain the boundaries necessary to protect my family from further manipulation. The greatest lesson from this experience is that you cannot change other people, but you can control how you respond to them. You cannot make toxic people love you appropriately, but you can choose to build meaningful relationships with people who are capable of genuine love and loyalty. You cannot prevent people from trying to hurt you, but you can protect yourself by setting firm boundaries and surrounding yourself with people who have your best interests at heart. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for toxic family members is to refuse to enable their destructive behavior. Sometimes, protecting yourself requires disappointing people who have unrealistic expectations of what you owe them. Sometimes, building a healthy life means walking away from unhealthy relationships, even when those relationships involve people you once loved deeply. But most importantly, surviving betrayal and manipulation does not require becoming bitter or cynical. It requires becoming wise about who deserves access to your time, energy, and resources. It requires learning the difference between people who love you and people who need something from you. It requires building a life so fulfilling and surrounded by genuine relationships that toxic people cannot disrupt your peace or happiness. I learned that the best revenge against people who tried to destroy you is not hurting them back. The best revenge is living a life so successful, loving, and fulfilling that their absence improves rather than diminishes your happiness. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who were trying to manipulate or take advantage of you? How did you find the courage to protect yourself while still maintaining your values and integrity? I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who is facing similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building meaningful lives despite difficult circumstances. Sharing these stories helps other people realize they are not alone in dealing with toxic family dynamics and that it is possible to create healthy boundaries without losing your compassion or integrity. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of a community that supports people through difficult family situations. I hope you find the courage to protect your own peace and happiness, and the wisdom to build relationships with people who truly value and respect you. Take care of yourselves and remember that you deserve to be surrounded by people who love you for who you are, not for what you can provide them.